On today's show, we'll be talking about innovation, nonprofits, and women's impact in this arena. We'll be talking with Devin Thorpe, the champion of social good. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Madeline Blair, and this is Unlocked, where every conversation helps you discover the resilience and creativity to unlock your own potential for impact. Speaking of impact, if you like the show and you like what we do and support us, the free, simple way to do that is to hit the thumbs up and subscribe button. My commitment to you is that I will work to make sure this show is better for you every week. We'll listen to your feedback, we'll find the guest you want me to speak to, and we'll continue to do what we do. For those of you who give me feedback, I will give you a 15-minute free consultation. Thanks so much. This is the last of the 3-part series on crowdfunding, from how to invest and to seek investment from $100 to $5 million. Yvonne DeMonk talked about finding investment opportunities through crowdfunding and the benefits of doing so. Carl Dakin talked about how to build a funding proposal. That's kind of about the field and about how. But today, we'll be talking about why, with lots of examples. Now, when we think about innovation, most of us picture tech startups or fast-moving businesses bringing the next big thing to market. But what if some of the most creative, life-changing innovations is happening in nonprofits? My guest today, Devin Thorpe, says it absolutely is. He also believes that even if there are already organizations tackling an issue you care deeply about, there's still room and need for your unique approach, because every new nonprofit brings fresh energy, new networks, and different ways to solve persistent problems. Here's something else you might not know. Women make up about 70% of the nonprofit workforce, and more than half of all board members are women. Yet only 30% of large nonprofits are led by women. That gap tells us two things. First, women are the heart of this sector. And second, there's enormous opportunity for more women to lead, start, and shape it. Devin will help us see why founding a nonprofit or joining one as a leader or board member can be one of the most powerful ways to make a difference. He'll also share how innovation in nonprofits is too often overlooked and how each of us can change that. This is the 3rd episode in our Unlocking Crowdfunding series. And I think it's going to be one of the best. Well, I shouldn't say that. I think it's going to be really great. Devin is the CEO of the Super Crowd, Inc., a public benefit corporation helping diverse founders and social entrepreneurs raise capital via impact crowdfunding. He is also a best-selling author who calls himself a champion of social good. I think before I continue with his description, I'm going to remind you about this thing called crowdfunding. Now, those 2 shows that I talked about, one with Evan DeMonk and the other with Carl David, I will be putting the links to them on the show notes because it's important to refresh yourself on what crowdfunding really means, if you don't know it already. Devin is the CEO of the Super Crowd, Inc., a public benefit corporation helping diverse founders and social entrepreneurs raise capital via impact crowdfunding. He is also a best selling author who calls himself a champion of social good. He has trained and coached nonprofits across the country, especially regarding fundraising from the crowd. His most recent book, Crowdfunding Made Simple, a step by step guide to raising capital using AI tools, is a powerful resource for helping entrepreneurs succeed. His books, read over 1 million times, help people do more good. He has produced about 1,500 episodes of his show featuring luminary change agents, including Bill Gates, now streaming on television as the Super Crowd presents Superpowers for Good. He draws on his experience as an investment banker, CFO, treasurer, and U.S. Senate staffer. Frequently finding himself on airplanes, Devin is grateful to be middle seat sized. I love that phrase, Devin. And I think it's time I bring him on.
Yeah, I barely fit on the screen. I have to sit up high. It's great to be with you. Thank you, Madeline, for having me. It's a joy to be on.
Thank you so much for being here. It's, when I started this series, I thought, who can really cap it? And I think you're going to be the one. So,
well, thank you very much. I'm excited. I'm glad that you were able to connect with Carl and with Yvonne at the Super Crowd 25 event. I thank you for coming. It was great to see you there, and fun to really connect with you. And it was fun to see you connect with Carl and Yvonne there, because they're great guys.
They are terrific guys. And as I told you before, I only sat in the green room. The VIP room, excuse me.
Yeah.
I never went in to hear any of the lectures. But that's all I needed.
That's right. That's where the action is.
That's right. Well, let's jump into what we're going to be talking about. You've argued that innovation in the nonprofit world is underestimated, that we should welcome new organizations even when others already exist. Why do you think that fresh ideas are so essential, and what myths still hold people back from starting something new?
Yeah, I think the biggest problem in this space is the established players hate new entrants because they compete for the donations for the same function, right? So if I am running a large cancer fighting organization and someone comes in as a new startup nonprofit, I would perceive them as competing for the same dollars that I'm trying to get from donors. And to some extent, that could be true. I view that fundamental premise that they're competing for the same dollars may be wrong, and largely is. There is a whole universe of people that are not donating to their maximum capacity. What they need is a compelling story to be convinced to donate. And so I think the premise that we're competing for dollars is flawed. There are more dollars out there. We just have to convince people to share them. So that's one thing. The other thing is the premise that large organizations have it all figured out is one that, of course, they believe, and I no longer believe that to be true. Not that they aren't doing great work. Of course they are. And if you were, say, wanted to do exactly what the American Heart Association is doing, as a for instance, right? Let's say, oh, I'm going to do exactly what they're doing, only better, right? The odds are you would fail miserably, right? Because everyone you pitch would say, I'm sorry, I already give to them and they're doing fine work. And so I'm not going to give you any money, and you'd fail. And here's another key thing to take away from this. Nonprofits have to be profitable. I think there is a mistaken notion, right, in people's minds that a nonprofit doesn't need money and doesn't need to be profitable. And of course, They have to be profitable. Absolutely. Their revenue comes from asking people for donations. Those donations are tax deductible because they have a special sanction from the IRS that makes them eligible to collect tax deductible donations. It's a little bit complicated, but the fundamental premise, they have to be profitable, and they can't be if they're competing head to head with an organization that's doing a good job, like, say, the American Heart Association. So, with that in mind, uh, what the world needs is innovation, genuine innovation, to say, I'm going to do something different and new. I'm going to tackle a problem no one else is tackling, or I'm going to tackle a problem in a new way. Those nonprofits are vital, even if they're brand new startup. And and I would also argue the nonprofits will sometimes argue about efficiency. I think sometimes the smallest nonprofits can be the most cost efficient because they often operate all on a volunteer basis, right? A nonprofit with $63,000 in revenue annually, right, may not be paying anyone to do any of the work. It may be all volunteer led. So that money may be going 100% into programs. And so I don't think there is any compelling argument that new nonprofits shouldn't form. I think there's a good compelling argument that new nonprofit leaders need to be innovative uh, to succeed, right? Because they can't succeed otherwise.
I'm excited to hear you say this because I'm thinking about the demographics of our population in this country. There's a big bulge, as we know, called the boomers. And the boomers are at that place where they probably have finished their career or are really close to finishing it.
Yeah.
And they probably don't want to stop. And this is a perfect area where they can look around and say, you know what? I think I can do this better, or I can do this because there's a gap here. Yeah, this is exciting. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And
also want,
that's,
go ahead.
go ahead.
I was going to shift to another subject. All right. I'm curious, though, about your path. I mean, I've talked about boomers. Your path was from corporate finance to social entrepreneurship and a kind of innovation story. It is. Talk about that personal transition.
Yeah, the reality is my transition from corporate finance to social impact began when I was 11 years old. You say, wait a minute, you couldn't have possibly been doing corporate finance when you were 11. But the reality is, I that summer, my the the Teton Dam in southern Idaho failed, and you may have had enough birthdays to remember that, but it was 1976, and it flooded the town of Rexburg, Idaho. And it left about 80% of the structures damaged or destroyed, killed more than a dozen people, and thousands of farm animals mostly. It was just terrible. It was devastating, as you can imagine. The first time they filled the dam, it broke. My father came to me that summer and said, Devin, I'm going with the church group up to Rexburg on Saturday, and I'd invite you to come with me to help out. And we're going to go dig muck and mud out of basements. I thought that sounded like a good time. I remember being just giddy with excitement. We rode a bus up, and I remember getting on that bus, and I swear I can remember every telephone pole we passed on a 4-hour ride. We got on the bus at 2 a.m. We got there about 6 or 6:30. It was just dawn. We got out. Everybody got a donut. I probably had two, and we went to work. And I remember they gave me a shovel that I couldn't use. I was really not very productive. Uh, I went back a few years ago to look for the statue that they had erected in my honor, and I couldn't find it. It was weird. I was so disappointed that they didn't have the little statue. Devin was here helping back in 1976, and no, the reality is, I remember that day thinking, "Wow, I really made a difference in the world." And in hindsight, I recognize I was probably more in the way, eating more cookies and donuts than I deserved, and probably didn't really help. But because I thought I did, I remember feeling so good about having helped. I said, I'm never going to miss an opportunity to serve other people. Now
Wow.
I have. But that experience really framed my life. It, in many ways, has come to define my life. So even when I started into my corporate finance career, I always believed that mid career I would shift to a second career focused on social impact. And 15 years ago, I did. I did exactly that. After 25 years in corporate finance, I shifted gears. And it's been an amazing journey. I've loved every minute of it. But, that's why my focus today is on helping people use money for good, right? And there are so many ways to do that. And I'm excited to share insights with my community all the time.
I am thrilled to hear that story because I'm very keen on helping our teenagers. And 11 is just getting into that
Yeah, yeah,
because those are formative years, and they're years when young people are trying to figure out who they are, what they're going to do. We always ask them, "What are you going to do?" Meaning a job, but in fact, there's so many other things. Thank you for that story. Terrific. Well, I love the example, but I want to hear some more examples of a nonprofit crowdfunding campaign that truly changed a community.
Well, I want to give you a for-profit enterprise as an example because that's more aligned
Okay.
with my work today. But there's one of the things that we do. Of course, I host a show a little bit like yours, not nearly as good, but it's great. It's great. It's almost as good as yours.
I'm
And
sure.
on my show, we frequently have people on who are founders of social enterprises. That's and One of the women who is on my show runs a company called Siren Biotechnology, working on cancer treatments. And so I had her on the show, and then I invited her to apply to pitch at our quarterly live pitch last spring. And she agreed to apply, did apply. She was chosen in a competition by the judges to actually come on the show and do our quarterly live pitch. She participated in that, did very well in that competition. Some of the judges invested in her business right there because of her participation in that. She was able to leverage that and go on to raise over $4 million on her WeFunder campaign. So this is money she raised from the crowd that is going directly to help turn cancer, every kind of cancer potentially, using her radical new therapies. This could make every kind of cancer treatable so that people aren't routinely dying from cancer. Like my father died of pancreatic cancer 9 days after being diagnosed.
Oh, yeah.
And to think about, a world in which obviously we need earlier diagnoses, better tools for diagnosing pancreatic cancer. That's a problem still. But then to be able to treat it readily and easily, boy, that's game changing. And she's working on that. A lot of people are, but now ordinary folks like you and me have the opportunity to invest. She's been very successful. That's a real game changer for all of us.
That's fabulous. Would you say the name again of that?
Yes, the name of the founder is Dr. Nicole Palk,
Paul,
and let's
P
see,
A
I think
L.
it's Paulk. I think. Let me just double check. Yeah, Paulk, and her and her company is called Siren Biotechnology.
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 Thank you. And presumably, people can still invest in it.
Her campaign just
Ah,
ended days ago. But yes, she's been hugely successful with that, and so it's great to see where that just provides such a powerful foundation for her going forward. that
Absolutely.
capital. Yeah.
Well, speaking of change makers, you even got to interview Bill Gates. I'm totally impressed by that. Just getting to him is a challenge. Uh,
Yeah.
what's the one insight from those many conversations that you've had, and obviously you continue to have on your show, that really captures the spirit of innovation or persistence that's needed to make a new nonprofit thrive?
Yeah, I think this is true for all social enterprises, for profit and nonprofit. But yeah, I'll take a lesson I learned from Bill Gates because it's really one of the most profound lessons I've learned doing my show. In part because I said, well, this is Bill Gates. I ought to, he's had a little bit of success. Maybe I should listen to the guy.
Mm.
But yeah, his organization reached out to me to be on my show. I was thrilled,
Oh,
and that's lightning strikes. I actually got to interview him twice. Once I didn't do a show with him; I just interviewed him for an article. But the one of the things that I asked him on the show was, "What is your superpower?" I call my show "Superpowers for Good." Right?
right.
You mentioned that, and I asked him, "What is your superpower?" And he said, "Patience was his superpower." And he,
Patience.
he he alluded to some other things, including the fact that he has some resources, but that kind of makes him powerful. But the patience is really something important. And I did some research and some thinking about this, and it became clear that patience is really a powerful principle here. And so many of us get impatient with things, and yet their patience is a skill unlike many other things. I think there are some things that are a little more innate. We have a more natural ability to do some things than others. I get that. And people often think of patience as being sort of in that bucket, right? Oh, she's so patient, she's so kind, and you might think of another, oh, he's so impatient, he's such a jerk. Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. The same human beings that were camping outside of an Apple store to get early versions of the iPhones, sometimes for days, were doing nothing but waiting, right? Waiting for days. All they did for 2 days, 3 days sometimes was wait. And yet, those same people might go into a McDonald's and get furious if they have to wait 10 minutes for a Big Mac, right? Because they're saying, no, wait a minute. A Big Mac is supposed to be out in 2 minutes max, right? Why did it take 10, right? And so you say, well, wait a minute. Why can that same person patiently wait for days for an iPhone and get impatient because a Big Mac takes 10 minutes? And the answer is not that the iPhone is worth more. That's a misleading conclusion. The issue is that you expected when you went to the Apple store to wait, you expected to be in that line for 2 days or 3 days, whatever it took. When you went into McDonald's, you expected that Big Mac in 2 minutes, and it took 10. And you say, well, okay, that's reasonable. Here's the thing, our expectations are 100% controllable. Our expectations are 100% in our own minds, and we determine them. And so I try to apply this principle ever since I've learned this, right? And I sort of covered this in my book, Superpowers for Good. And the idea here is that, you know, when you're tackling a project, if you give yourself some bandwidth in the expectations. Like, I mean, as simple as like a home improvement project, right? Uh, but anything, anywhere, give yourself extra time consciously and acknowledge that there will be challenges and difficulties you don't foresee. Bake that into your thinking. And then as they happen, you're better able to address all of those problems and wait for the logical outcomes, the outcomes you want. So, anyway, I really think that patience was a powerful lesson. I'm grateful to Bill Gates for teaching me that.
Oh, it is a wonderful, wonderful superpower to have. And as
Yeah.
you say, it is completely in your control.
Yes, that's the magic of this particular superpower. Some superpowers, I talk to people and I think, man, I'm not sure I could ever be good at that. But patience, I think there's a, I think there's a pattern we can all follow to become more patient.
Because I've watched some documentaries on Bill Gates, and one of what I consider to be his superpowers is that he reads constantly, and he goes
Yeah,
through books and reports, and he carries them around with him every week. He's got a new
yeah,
bag of them,
yeah,
and he goes through them. And I thought, I could never do that. I wouldn't even want to
yeah.
do that.
You know,
Patience, I can do.
there was a Netflix documentary about Bill Gates in which I was on the screen for 1 second.
Well,
It was long enough that when it was first launched and everybody was watching it on Netflix, I had all my friends coming up, "Hey, I saw you on the Bill Gates documentary." 1 second, literally.
that's okay. You were
It
on.
was long enough. It was long enough to get my friends to recognize me.
Oh, marvelous. All right. So we know that's a great superpower, but what are some of the key elements of a successful crowdfunding campaign? Now, Carl talked about all kinds of things that you had to
Yeah,
do, but I'd like to
yeah,
hear it from your perspective.
yeah. And my perspective is similar to Carl's. Carl taught me something that's really vital, and let me just highlight that thing. But when you're doing an offering, especially that is related to a consumer product in any way, shape, or form, you got to build in those consumer incentives, bonuses, perks, whatever you want to call them.
Hmm.
But individual investors will respond to that in a way more quickly than to the investment terms. And that's a Carl Dakin tool that I learned, and I'm really grateful for that. It's something I was aware of before I met Carl, but he's convinced me that's vital if you've got a consumer product. Okay, but let me go back to the beginning. And when we're talking about an investment opportunity for social enterprises, I think it's important to recognize your first step is to make sure that your investment terms are right, proper, fair, good. Right? There's a Rotary standard that we like to brag about in Rotary, and the question is it fair to all concerned? Right? And that is really the standard you want to use when you are figuring out how to structure the offering. Is it fair? Are you offering enough compensation to your investors for them to get a reward relative to the risk and the social impact? Those two things come together. But remember, even investors who say they are impact investors and focused on investing for good, most have clear, measurable return targets, financial return targets. And if you're not offering enough compensation for the risk you're imposing on their capital, they will not invest. So it's important to have that in mind. So step one, good structure. Step two is to tell a clear story about your social impact. And this is true for all crowdfunders, whether or not you are think of yourself today as a social entrepreneur. Because the reality is that social impact will resonate with the audience you want to reach. And so you've got to identify it. I'm not suggesting greenwashing, faking, lying, cheating. No, 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 no. Look for the real impact. How is your product, service, company going to change the world? If you're Nicole Paul and you're potentially curing cancer, that's a pretty good one, right? And so you want to lean into the social impact. It's you start. Message one is not, hey, we're going to make a lot of money selling cancer therapy. Message one is, we're going to cure cancer, and your family, you personally, may benefit from not having to die of cancer. That's a pretty good social impact, right? Um, and there are all kinds of different ways to approach that. But, sometimes I see people in, like, even in the healthcare space, that forget that they need to talk about that social impact. They're so focused on the potential to make $1 billion from their new therapy that they miss the that they miss the importance of talking about the social impact. So you've got to tell a social impact story that will resonate, especially with individual investors who are thinking about whether to invest $10, $100, $1,000. Those folks will be primarily focused on the social impact. They will get to the deal terms later. And then if they're good enough, if they're fair to all concerned, bam, they're going to do it. So, and then the third key is that this reality, crowdfunding is really hard. You have to work at it. If you're going to raise capital from the crowd, you've got to plan on really devoting your time and energy and attention to this. I was interacting with Nicole Pollock, the one that we talked about just last week, or earlier this week, in fact, earlier this week as we're talking. And she's exhausted. She has done this, but she says, Devin, I have got to move on. I can't. I invited her back on my show to sort of celebrate. She said, Devin, I got to move on. This was, I got to go run a business now. I got some money. I got to go run a business. But clearly she had embraced the hard work. And I think there's another reality here it's a painful, awkward reality. But if you want to raise more than a few $100,000, you got to get serious about spending money. You will need to work. There's no alternative to work. It's exhausting. But if you want to raise a lot of money, you're going to have a marketing budget. You've got to plan on that. That's the reality. And so you've got to be constant with it. I was talking to Ron Miller, is the co-founder of Start Engine, one of the largest investment crowdfunding portals, worth $1 billion today. And he was saying this advice. It was interesting to hear him say it. He says, if you have an alternative to crowdfunding, if someone is willing to give you their money another way, take it. Because crowdfunding is hard. But a lot of people, for a lot of different reasons, don't really qualify for a bank loan, don't really qualify for a grant, don't really qualify for venture capital, don't really qualify for traditional angel investment. A lot of businesses, think about it, venture capitalists fund 0.1% of new businesses every year. It's a tiny fraction. The SBA may make tens of thousands of loans a year, but mostly to businesses that are pretty well established and at or near profitability, maybe well into profitability. So there's this whole slew, literally millions of businesses for whom the best source of capital is probably crowdfunding, despite the hard work and effort required.
Listen, starting any company is hard work.
Yeah, it's the reality. Yeah.
It's the reality. That's right. Ah, gosh. Well, you talk about something called a fiscal sponsor. How does that play into this? What is that?
Well, a fiscal sponsor is important for nonprofits or aspiring nonprofits or social enterprises that have a genuine charitable function in one way or another. Let me give you an example. A for-profit business. So there are two primary ways in which a fiscal sponsor works, right? If you're starting a nonprofit, you can get a fiscal sponsor, which is simply another nonprofit that agrees to accept donations on your behalf so that they become tax deductible before your nonprofit status is approved by the IRS. So that's path one. Let's set that aside. And path two is, let's say you're a for-profit social enterprise and you're doing something that is genuinely charitable. You can approach a nonprofit and say, we would like you to sponsor this work. We would like you to be the fiscal sponsor for this charitable activity that we conduct. And so it might be fairly narrowly crafted so that the donations that come through the fiscal sponsor, becoming tax deductible, go exclusively to fund a particular charitable function of the for-profit business, but that money comes in as revenue for the for-profit business and then can be spent on the nonprofit cause. So, for instance, I invested in a little business that does training on effective communication for people who are neurodivergent to help them better understand and communicate with people who are more like you and me, whatever that means, right?
Yep.
So it's she found the founder of this business set up at my suggestion. I would like to believe, because I did talk to her and suggest she do this. She set up a fiscal sponsorship with a partnering nonprofit and said, if you'll donate for this function, we will provide these services to people who can't afford to pay for them. And so that we're not just serving people who are affluent and able to pay for this, either because of a parent or because they themselves are affluent because of a job, they want to, advance their career or something. So they take their courses. But now she can serve people who can't afford it by taking donations to support that program. So that's an example. So she gets the revenue, she performs the same function she does, but instead of having the student pay, she's having donations pay for the students to go through the program. So that's an example of how a fiscal sponsorship can potentially work for a for-profit business to be really game-changing.
Yeah. That's got my wheels going.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you have a lot of nonprofit related content on your show. It would be reasonable for you to explore fiscal sponsorship with a nonprofit to see if on your show they would provide some sort of support for the nonprofit related work you do. So that'd be an example. Wouldn't be crazy to have that conversation.
All right. Good. Now, I want to shift us to look specifically at this gender issue. You hint at it. 70% of nonprofit employees are women, but they're not very, only 30% are led by women. Talk about that issue and can you give us some examples?
Yeah, it is wonderful to see a space where women so thoroughly dominate. It's becoming true in accounting too, as well. That a majority of people in accounting now are women, which is kind of a cool thing to see. But in the nonprofit space, women dominate in every way and form except CEOs of the large nonprofits. That continues to be dominated by men. And I think it just simply reflects, biases and traditions that we as a society are still struggling to overcome. But, they're in the social entrepreneurship space, we see a similar pattern, right? Venture capitalists invest about 2% of their money in women-founded businesses. 2%.
2%.
And that's sure. When you consider that half the population is female and 2% goes to women-founded businesses, that's pretty devastating. I wrote about this problem for the first time a dozen years ago for Forbes. And yet I still see the same data year after year after year. VCs are not funding women. And I think it's quite simply that they do it wrong. They just do it wrong. And the most common mistake venture capitalists make in choosing who to finance is that they often will look for people to come with a quality introduction. So they
Ah,
expect you to come not kind of over the transom. They're not looking for you to mail in your business plan or email your pitch in or submit it on the submit your plan here. There that those that they receive that way go into a pile managed by an intern level person, and they never get to a partner, never get the light of day. What does happen is if a partner is has a golfing buddy that introduces him to an entrepreneur, that person gets a meeting immediately. Very different scenario. So that's one of their screening mechanisms. Well, let's think about this. Is a black woman from Baltimore who may have an MBA from Johns Hopkins, one of the top programs in the country, super bright, but grew up in the inner city of Baltimore. Would she have the same likely network giving her access to a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley as a white guy who attended Stanford and got an MBA? Almost no chance that she's got the same network. And so you can quickly see how there is a structural problem in the process. I think they're broken. I think they do it wrong. I think that's the problem. Women are great entrepreneurs. We see it all the time.
yes.
And in the crowdfunding world, what we're seeing is that women are getting a larger share. Is it fair yet? I'm not sure it's their fair share, but they're getting a bigger share of the capital markets, as are people of underrepresented founders broadly. There's clear evidence that minorities are getting more capital as a percentage than they get from venture capitalists, and we also see the same kinds of biases in banking, right? So bank loans, SBA loans are subject to the same kind of adverse selection that we see with venture capital. Not as extreme, but we still see it. And so crowdfunding is becoming a path for those who are being excluded from those parts of the capital market to access capital. And it's, I think, a wonderful and important part.
That kind of moves into my next topic of interest, which is really practical advice for women who want to do it. Maybe it's a social impact. Maybe it's eventually will be a for-profit organization. What would you advise?
Yeah. I think there are lots of approaches, but one of the things that I think can really help develop a career, and this is true for men as well, is to serve on a nonprofit board. And the reason that I think this is a powerful opportunity for including everyone, period, end of story. There's no one for whom this isn't a career enhancing benefit. By serving on a board, you begin to understand how corporate governance works, because a good functioning nonprofit board works a lot like a corporate board, whether it's General Motors or Apple or whatever company it may be, right? They have a board of directors, and it governs ultimately what happens at the company. And so having an opportunity to serve on a board gives you a perspective that you cannot gain hands on any other way. And
I
so I
couldn't
encourage
agree with you more.
uh,
I've been on nonprofit boards, and you're right. You see it entirely different.
and it also provides an extraordinary network for connecting with
Yes,
people. And
yes.
so I encourage everyone to do it. But let's talk about women. Um, I think this is the nonprofit world tends to be the most friendly place for women. And so it is an opportunity to become involved. And I think there are two things that would help you build a relationship that would get you a board seat. Now, there are times and circumstances where people get invitations to serve on a board by happenstance. They happen to know someone who's on the board and they get that invitation. Um, but most often, it comes from developing a relationship that grows out of donations and volunteerism.
Mm.
And I know some of the women are saying, well, I can't give lots of money to a nonprofit. I, I want you to slow your roll a little bit. Be patient with me. But let's say you make $75,000 a year and you committed just 3% of your money to a nonprofit you really care about and where you do some volunteer work. Well, 3% of 75 grand is over $2,000 a year. That's a meaningful amount of money to a lot of nonprofits.
Mm.
So now you're volunteering time, you're donating a little bit of money, maybe a meaningful little bit of money, right? Especially to a small nonprofit. It's, I mean, it would be so natural for that person, that woman, to say, hey, I've been volunteering 100 hours a year. I've been donating, thousands of dollars a year for 3 years in a row. Don't you need me on the board? Right? Don't you want people like me on your board? And they're going to say, yes, we do. Let's work
Mhm.
you into the cycle. So, that path can take a while, but that path I have found tried and true. Right?
Yeah.
That path works. So you don't even need to be rich to make a meaningful donation and contribute of time. If you're really rich, you can skip the volunteering and just do a bigger
Just,
donation. And
just
trust me,
send
you'll
him a
get
big
an
check.
invitation to be on the board if you want.
Right.
So,
Ah, oh, terrific. Uh, okay, we're almost finished our time, but I have to ask you, if there was just one superpower that makes a person effective in launching or leading a nonprofit, what is it?
yeah, I think it's true for all kinds of social enterprises. In fact, it really isn't different for profit, cynical, the worst exploitive for profit businesses. It's the same fundamental principle. It's a universal requirement, whether you're doing the most good or the most evil. It's grit, it's persistence, it's resilience. Those are, way three names for the same thing. And the other thing that I would say is that successful entrepreneurs tend to pair their grit, persistence, and resilience with optimism. I've often said that uh, entrepreneurs don't see a glass as half full or half empty. They see a glass, even if it's empty, as full because in their mind, they know where to get the water. It doesn't matter that it's not full right now. I know where to get the water. Sometimes that gets them into trouble. But the fact is, that kind of optimism is empowering and enabling to the grit, persistence, and resilience because it'll enables them to get up and try something new tomorrow.
Devin, of all the things you've talked about today, that last metaphor, I'm telling you, I'm going to use that all the time. You are so right. An optimistic person doesn't even look at the level of water in the glass. It's just immaterial to them. Oh, thank you for
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And thank you so much for this conversation. I, I am thrilled. It's a perfect way to wrap these three shows.
Well,
Okay.
thank you so much. It's been a joy to be with you, Madeline. I really appreciate your time, and it's an honor to be on your show. It truly is.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Uh, Final last words for the audience.
Oh, thank you so much. I encourage everyone to be sure, if you haven't already, some of the folks who are watching this are watching because they know me. I encourage you to be sure to subscribe to Madeline's new or her YouTube channel if you haven't already, or follow her show on E360 TV or elsewhere. But I would also invite you all to subscribe to my newsletter. Those of you who are in Madeline's community, I would encourage you and invite you to subscribe to my newsletter. We send out a daily newsletter, and if you hate email, I get that. We have a weekly digest, and you can opt into just the one email a week from us, and we'll respect that. But we would love to have all of you following us as well at superpowersforgood.com.
And we're going to put that link on the show notes as well.
Great, thank you.
Thorpe. Yeah, Devin Thorpe. Thank you.
Yeah.
Every now and then, there is something that changes how I think about the world. Grounds for Thought is a place where I talk about these moments so that you can explore the meaning for yourself.
In business school, success was measured in dollars. You learned how to make them on Wall Street, start a company to earn them, or climb the corporate ladder to collect them. I followed that last path until I realized I wanted more. When I joined the World Bank, I was still paid a salary, but the work gave something different, a sense that my hours meant something to the world. The bank's mission was to end poverty, and today it's called to end poverty on a livable planet. My paycheck covered my time and energy, but my creativity, my mentoring, my innovation, those were gifts. They weren't required, but they were freely given because they made the world and me a little better. Listening to Devin reminded me of that other dimension of work, the quiet, generous power behind those who give their time and imagination to build nonprofits. It also brought back a book that forever changed how I see the world. It's called The Gift: How the Creative Spirit Transforms the World by Lewis Hyde. Hyde describes cultures where giving isn't transactional or even charity. It's a way to weave community. A gift moves from one person to another, gathering meaning as it travels, creating a network of belonging. Margaret Atwood captured it perfectly when she said, "It gets at the core of their dilemma, how to maintain yourself alive in the world of money when the essential part of what you do cannot be bought or sold." Crowdfunding, even when it involves investment, is really about that movement of generosity, giving something that enables others to create and serve, and in the process, be generous as well. And along the way, it nourishes our own spirits. The gift changed how I make decisions and how I define contribution. It helped me understand why people start nonprofits and why I moved from consulting with organizations and leaders to hosting Unlocked. Today, I share from my own experience what it takes to lead, to manage a career, to nurture resilience, to spark innovation and productivity in a team. Not because it's required, but because it's mine to give. I seek compensation for direct expenses, of course, technology, production, support. But the real reward is knowing that my experience might help someone else find strength, purpose, or joy. Atwood was right. The essential part of what I offer can't be bought or sold. It can only be given. And Hyde was right too. When we give, we belong. And belonging, that's what keeps the spirit alive. That's what strengthens the social fabric. So I leave you with this. What gift are you creating in your life right now? And how will you know when sharing it feels like success? Thank you for joining me today. I hope this series on crowdfunding has inspired you in new ways. If you're on YouTube, click the like button and subscribe. It always helps me, but it also helps people who are trying to learn what's offered here. I'm Madeline Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilient leader.